If you are struggling to scale your business past 10K a month and you've tried content and it's not working, and you've tried like YouTube and you're trying to post and nothing's working because you don't actually know what you're doing in posting your videos, listen up, because YouTube is still the best way to scale your business, especially if you have like a boutique business, an agency, or anything where you are like working from home and doing a lot of service for clients. A really wonderful way to do that is YouTube, but you have to do it right. And it's not just like full-length YouTube videos, it's YouTube Shorts, it's repurposing those for Instagram, for Facebook, for TikTok, for whatever. For me personally, scaling my business to $10,000 a month was probably the hardest work I ever had to do. And then keeping it at $10,000 a month was like super, super, super hard. But it actually got significantly easier when I started going from that 10K a month to like 50K a month. And that sounds crazy, right? 50K a month should be 5 times harder, but crazy enough, it's really not. Honestly, if you're trying to make content, but you're doing it really, really badly, this can actually harm your business in comparison with making good content that scales your personal brand, that scales your business. I have personally worked with over 3,000 female business owners to help them scale their businesses past this point to where they're making a full-time living, especially from making content that sells. Even though when I first started, I was making crappy content that wasn't selling, that wasn't getting me clients, that might have gotten me views occasionally, but wasn't actually making me any money, which is where a lot of content creators fail, or a lot of women who try to be content creators to make money with their business fail, is they're not making content that actually supports the business and supports bringing in new clients or client retention. And one of the biggest issues I was having is I was playing it way too safe with my content. I was literally writing out a script that was clear and perfect and concise so that I could make content that was clear and perfect and concise and easy to go over and easy to replicate, but it wasn't actually good content because I wasn't taking any risks with it, and people weren't responding to it because I was reading off this scripted content. People really didn't start responding to my content and getting interested in me and my content until I started being really genuine with myself and with how I presented myself and how I presented my content. Hell, my first ever viral YouTube video that got like 50,000 views in 2 days, which for some of you isn't a lot, for some of you that's insane, but the first one I ever actually did that with was one where I was extremely vulnerable because I talked about an event I had just attended that basically went to hell and my body went into survival mode and I blacked out for several hours without being able to remember anything, without taking any medications or alcohol or substances. And that vulnerable video got me a lot more interest, a lot more subscribers, a lot more views than my previously super scripted, boring content, because let's face it, super scripted content where you're just talking and reading off of a script and sounding really monotone is really boring. Another thing I see a lot of female entrepreneurs do is they don't actually talk about anything they care about. You don't have to give away your address in order to be vulnerable. You don't have to share who you voted for in order to be vulnerable and build a business that can appeal to everyone. However, if you're not willing to stand for literally anything, anytime, people aren't really going to be interested. They're going to feel like you don't have an opinion, and therefore you probably don't have enough experience to understand what's important and why things work and why things don't. And so you're not going to see nuance in their situation and in their brand when they hire you to help. You have to be able to form an opinion and analyze why things are working and why things aren't if your goal is to fix people's problems. You know, like how a lot of weight loss coaches say that the number one thing that you have to do is calories in, calories out. But these are men who don't have to deal with monthly hormone cycles or PCOS or other diseases or disorders that make it extraordinarily hard to lose weight, even when you are minimizing your calories, or when you are active but your body is refusing to actually use calories for functionality. So when you're not active, you're basically shut down to avoid calorie usage. And a lot of women in the same space tend to try to be over helpful. They try to give all of this information so we can have a massive spectrum of things, but you're not trying to appeal to everyone. For example, my business, I'm not trying to appeal to everyone. I'm not trying to get every single woman who's ever considered starting a business to come and buy from me, right? I really don't care. I can't even take on that many clients. It's the same reason that the Amore group, one of my businesses, literally has a waiting list for being able to make content and stuff. It's because I'm not trying to appeal to everyone. I'm trying to appeal to a really specific group of people. So instead of trying to be generally helpful and making your content apply to everyone so that you don't have to deal with bean soup theory, which is basically people missing the point of your content and arguing, well, this won't work for me because of this, this, and this. Well, guess what? My content's not for you. My content's not for everyone, and that's fine. It's allowed. In order to narrow down your niche, your business, your audience, you have to be able to say who your content is for and who it's not for. And that means you have to have an opinion, you have to have conviction, you have to have a deep understanding of who you're actually serving in your business. And then that needs to carry over to your content. Side note, if you need a helpful start on this, make sure to check out the link in my description to get my 100 hooks that help you build your content, help you build an audience, and help you sell. And basically now I've given you all of these problems like, okay, well, how am I going to be charismatic on camera? What opinions am I supposed to say? And I don't get to pick those opinions for you. You get to pick your own opinions. I'm sorry to say I can't tell you exactly what to do all the time with everyone because I have thousands of people watching these videos and I can't help thousands of people with one single piece of advice. However, some general things that you do need to do are adopt a clear on-camera identity. You need to know who you're going to be on camera, and that can't be a boring person. If you hate cussing, make sure that you know you're not gonna cuss. Or if your prime audience, if your key demographic hates cussing, if your key demographic is women in their 50s or 60s who are very avid churchgoers, who read the Bible every single day, maybe don't cuss in your content. But if you're trying to appeal to younger women who take no shit and are trying to build something new or are trying to get something working and just really like the no-nonsense attitude, you can absolutely cuss. It's not about having someone's persona that someone tells you. It's not about believing every single person's piece of advice. It's picking something that's genuine to you and also your key demographic that you're trying to sell to. And unfortunately, you also need to practice talking on camera. Pretend that you're FaceTiming someone. Pretend that you're explaining something you're actually interested in. For me, that's pretty easy because I actually genuinely love my job. I genuinely love making women rich, helping them scale their businesses past those 10K, 50K, 100K months, and not having to stress about building content that sells and about literally building their platforms, right? And building out their persona so that they are more known, so that they have more authority on the subject they're speaking about. I really genuinely care about that, and that's why I talk about it a lot. But if you absolutely hate your business, you're either gonna have to get really good at faking it. I know some of you are already faking it sometimes, so take that practice and apply it to your content, but you need to actually sound like you're interested and sound like you care. Because if you make content where it sounds like you don't care, where you don't give a shit, or you just throw on influencer voice, where you're using a very specific tone of speaking just to make yourself sound elevated and relaxing and sound like some other content creator, then people are gonna see how fake that is and they're gonna feel how fake it is and they're not going to relate and they're not gonna wanna follow you and your content. The next thing that you wanna do is build story-driven educational content. So you're not focusing on just being educational, you also wanna tell a story. So anything you're trying to teach people, relate back to a story of some kind. If your entire business is based around trying to help someone's marriage, then use stories that illustrate how you have helped someone else's marriage or your own marriage using the strategy that you're teaching in order to explain the strategy. People get a lot more interested when we tell stories because it is literally ingrained in our DNA to care about stories. This is a way to build authority quickly because people feel like you're relatable and like you have things that you've experienced that you can talk about that make them feel like they should follow you and listen to you and trust your content for their business. But if you're just telling stories, then people don't really know why they should follow you or what value they're gonna get from you. Or if you're just being educational, people are going to be bored of you because educational content gets really boring really quickly because our brains just kind of start to tune out eventually from information overload. So the story is what gets the information to stick in our brain, and then the education is what gets people to follow and what gets them to consider you and your content to be more valuable. Third, you also need to increase your production value. If your videos are super grainy because you're filming inside at night with just your overhead light on, people aren't gonna wanna watch, especially if you're trying to make professional looking content for YouTube, because YouTube content cannot be what it was in 2006 or 2010 or 2015. You have to have content that looks good, that has somewhat of a production value. Your content has to look good in order to convert. Honestly, if I had tried to make content for social media using my original layout, my original studio where I was recording in my little tiny house shed that had no running water, no bathrooms, but I never had good enough lighting and all of my content looked really, really grainy and didn't feel professional. So if you're trying to do long form video and your content doesn't look professional, people are gonna watch somebody else's video about the same subject that actually has professional lighting. However, you don't have to have a massive expensive lighting setup in order for this to work. And to prove this point, I'm actually recording with no extra lighting other than the lighting that is built into my office right now. I'm recording at around noon. There's a window directly behind my camera right there, and my overhead fluorescent lights are on, and that's the only lighting I'm using. However, if you are really far away from the window, like if I were back here and my camera were much closer, then my lighting wouldn't be as good because you lose about 50% of your light every time you move a few feet further away from your light source. So record somewhat close to a big light source. I have big ass windows that make it a little bit easier, but you might not have something like that. So make sure that if you don't have something like that, that you record outside. And as far as your production quality goes, make sure that you have a really good way of recording audio. I use a small microphone to record my audio, and the one that I use came with my like $1,000 camera kit, but you don't have to spend $1,000 to have good audio. Just get like a really cheap quality microphone on Amazon that plugs into your phone if you're recording your content off your phone, because then you're gonna have significantly better audio. You're not gonna have a big echo, you're not gonna have a lot of empty sound, and your audio is not gonna be as sharp. You know when you listen to something and you can tell that they didn't use any sort of filter because their S's literally hurt your ears? That is something you need to avoid when you're making content. A lot of people listen to YouTube videos with headphones on. The next thing you need to do is stick to one message for at least 90 days. You don't wanna be flopping around on your content, flip-flopping everywhere, all over, creating content in every single niche possible. So you need to be making content about a specific thing for a long period of time. Don't just make 2 or 3 videos or a week's worth of videos and say, well, I'm not gaining many followers, so I guess that's a flop. I'm gonna switch to something else. The algorithms on these social media sites are aware that a lot of people do that, and therefore they don't give that many views to newer accounts and to accounts that have only posted a few things or post inconsistently. You are going to start to see more views when you are very, very consistent for a month or 2 months or 3 months. I highly, highly, highly recommend sticking with one message for 3 months so the algorithms know where to put you and so that your message doesn't get obscured by talking about all of these other different things. Like if you are a writer and you're trying to sell books, but you're desperate for money right now, then make 2 separate accounts, one to talk about your book, one to talk about this other business idea that you have. But if you keep flip-flopping with this different content, then you're actually just gonna end up losing a ton of your audience. My shift from authors, especially women who write romance books, over towards helping women entrepreneurs who want to scale from $10,000 to $20,000 a month up to $50,000 or $100,000 a month has been a slow transition because I'm aware that I'm losing followers from the author space in order to get followers in this other space. I'm very, very, very aware that this is a different type of content and that I'm going to lose people who are only interested in author content. If you are doing this and posting new content of all of these different niches all the time, you're not going to gain any followers because people are following you for a specific reason. So you need to stick with the reason they followed you when you're making your content. And of course, you need to show up with certainty. You need to not sound shy and quiet and like you don't give a shit or like you don't know what you're talking about. Confidence is a massive amount of it. You don't have to know absolutely everything about a subject, but you do need to sound confident and be willing to learn and find the answers when someone is looking for that answer. If you are trying to teach someone to train a stubborn dog and their dog has a stubborn issue that's different from the issue that you've dealt with your Belgian Malinois, but they have a Pomeranian, they are going to have different issues, and you need to be willing to learn how to fix that issue if your niche is dog training stubborn dogs and not dog training a stubborn Belgian Malinois that has no training before and is 2 years old. You have to be willing to learn and be able to give out that information for these other things and sound confident about it, or people aren't going to want to follow you. And that's not to say you can't niche down and have a hyper-specific niche, right? I'm sure there's a lot of people who make a ton of money specifically training a Belgian Malinois. And there's other people who specifically make a lot of money in helping potty train Pomeranians because they're notoriously difficult to potty train for a lot of people. But the overall point is, if your goal is to help teach stubborn pets, you need to be willing to help teach all stubborn pets. And if you're not willing to do that, you need to niche down even further. And you need to be confident about what you're saying and be able to say, I understand that XYZ didn't work for your niche, so we're gonna try ZYX for your niche because yes, your thing is a little bit different and some of the advice still has some crossover, but it's a little bit different when you go over here. Just like marketing books is a little bit different from marketing service-based businesses, you are going to have different things and different advice and different types of content that you're going to create for that specific niche, or different things you're going to teach people for those things. And just like my advice for authors isn't necessarily going to apply to advice for women who are getting started as realtors and want to build a social media presence, there's going to be a little bit of crossover, but I need to be willing and able to learn how to help with that specific niche if I'm saying, well, my goal is to help female business owners in high ticket sales and high ticket places. And none of this is being said to discourage you. I want you to be able to make content that sells and to actually get traction and to build up a business, because it shouldn't be hard. I know that we've been taught for so many years that making money is super hard. Making $10,000 a month is nearly impossible, but that's $120,000 a year, and that is what a store manager at Walmart makes. Not to say that managing a Walmart is not difficult, but it's an achievable goal, right? And you should be able to have an easy time. If Elon Musk can approach being a trillionaire just by throwing some money at governments and getting government contracts by pretending to be BFFs with government leaders, then you can make $50,000 a month with your service-based business that helps women find travel deals and travel for really cheap, or find really good deals on luxury stays without the luxury prices. And if you continue to be insecure about it and you're not willing to learn how to be confident and how to learn new strategies and to actually put yourself out there in a professional way, and you half-ass it just so that later on you can say, well, I tried and it didn't work, because trust me, that's an excuse I've gotten a lot. Well, I tried selling my books on TikTok, but it didn't work. I tried your strategy, but it didn't work. And then I look and they're doing every single thing that I know for a fact does not work in order to avoid the accountability of something not functioning and not working correctly and having to test and analyze and fix their strategy. It's a lot easier to complain that something is not working then learn how to fix it so that you can consistently build a much better business that makes significantly more money. So yeah, complaining about the thing is easy, but it makes for a hard life. What I would rather do is learn the hard things now so that I can have an easy business later on. And you're not going to find your audience and make a crap ton of money from your audience if you're not willing to put in the effort. If you don't have the time and the effort, but you're ready to hire someone to do it, make sure to check out the link in the description so that you can get on my mailing list and get on my wait list so that we can actually help you get a ton of PR and get a ton more views and build your personal brand online so that you can be the next thought leader in your industry.